doing that, I was face to face with it. It was holding me by my throat, and it felt like it was sucking something out of me.
I probably should have been more scared than I was when I witnessed the exorcism.
I turned and looked on my right side. When I did, there's a beam on the side of the tree, a large beam. It's looking at me and I'm looking at it.
After I hit the lock button and looked back up, I saw red eyes staring back at me.
That they're going to show multiple gods all over the earth, be able to speak in people's languages, and at that point, it kind of converge into this one entity, which will be revealed as extraterrestrial. You'll realize that aliens are the gods of old, and at that point, it'll wipe religion out of the context of humanity.
No, it couldn't have been a person, I know that. I know that people can't run through the woods like that.
So this thing comes into view, and I see it. It's 50 yards away from me. It's walking on two legs. It's huge. This is a big, hairy-looking being.
Welcome. I'm your host, and this is uNcomfortable. Welcome back to the show, my friends. I am your host, Eric Szilagyi. If you've had an uncomfortable experience and you'd like to have it featured on the show, please get a hold of me at contact.uncomfortable@gmail.com. Please make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram, both at Uncomfortable Podcast 65. Most importantly, please help share the show with others and make sure to leave us a 5-star rating and review where you can. That is the main way that you can help in getting the show out in front of other people. Uncomfortable/pod.com is now up and running, and that is the official landing page for Uncomfortable Podcast. If you are a fan of the show and you are interested in helping support what we're doing here, please go over to patreon.com/uncomfortablepodcast770 and see if any of the 3 tiers there interest you. I'll be adding a Halloween bonus for the members in a few short days. The link for Patreon and Uncomfortable Discord will be in the show notes below. Now, for tonight's guest. He is an author of several books, including the Amazon best-selling A Walk in the Shadows, A Complete Guide to Shadow People, Alaska's Mysterious Triangle, and most recently, Travels Through Time, Inside the Fourth Dimension. You may have likely seen him featured in some recognizable TV series like The Unexplained with William Shatner, the History Channel's Ancient Aliens, Travel Channel's The Alaska Triangle, and Discovery Plus's Fight Club. For 6 years, he's hosted the Edge of the Rabbit Hole live stream and Connecting the Universe interactive class. He owns and operates Haunted Road Media Publishing and Video Production Company, and directing and producing credits to his name. If you're ready, let's get into it. So if you will, please give a warm, uncomfortable welcome to my very accomplished guest, Mr. Mike Rickseker. Mike, welcome to Uncomfortable.
Thank you so much for having me tonight, Eric. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you being here, my friend. I said this before we even started the recording. I had seen you on TV on Ancient Aliens just 3 or 4 days prior to getting the email from your assistant. So I read the name and I was like, that can't be the same guy. And then I read a little bit more and I was like, hey, that's the same guy. So
nice piece of synchronicity.
It is. And I don't look at things as coincidences anymore. Synchronicities, I think, is a much more accurate term to use, even though it's getting overused a lot. I wish there was another word, because I think the television show, the documentary Hellier, kind of just burned that name, that word, synchronicities into my head. It was used so many times. It's like there's got to be another word, but until we find that, I think that'll work. Mike, man, you've got a lot of irons in the fire, don't you, my friend?
I got a few things going on, that's for sure. Yeah. Thanks for noticing.
Well, I mean, I subscribe to Disney or Discovery Plus. Literally every streaming service that I have, all the recommended stuff, everything in my feeds is all everything from UFOs to Bigfoot to, shadow people to, and most recently, I have to say that the ideas, not necessarily with time travel, but how we perceive time, right, and the lack of understanding that we have, and the inconsistencies that it brings about when you start thinking about all these things.
Correct.
And hopefully that sounds like where we're going to head down for at least a very good part of the first part of this podcast. I did ask that, given your Air Force history, thank you for your service, that we do end up getting into the topic of the disclosure stuff and the UAP stuff that's been so much in the headlines with us recently. But let's get into the time travel and all that stuff. I've got post-it notes with so many, maybe not necessarily questions, but interjections, and I can't wait to hear what you have to say. Time travel. Let's get into your. First of all, before we even get into all that, let everybody know where they can find your books. I'm sure they're on Amazon. Let everybody know. Plug your stuff. What have you got going on, and then start laying it on me. I want to know about the time travel.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me MikeRickseker.com. That's my primary website. It has all my books, my event schedule, all that wonderful stuff on there. I also have the ConnectedUniversePortal.com, which is where like-minded experiencers can come and participate in the conversation, become part of a community where we're diving into all of these different esoteric topics, whether that's lost ancient wisdom, shadow people, UFOs, all of that. We dive into it.
Well, like the majority of what you just listed off as far as the topics that you cover, the thing that really excited me about getting you on here is typically my show is people that are having, spiritual awakenings or hauntings or, dealing with shadow people or Bigfoot experiences and UFO experiences. And, the ancient stuff has always been kind of, I'm drawn to it, but I don't really have the resources to, like yourself, you can travel the world and go to these places and you can see these things as they were, back in history. And maybe if I had time travel available to me, I'd be able to do that. But,
right.
My segment of shows is more, experience related. And that's why I was really interested in talking to you about your research and the things that you've done. So string theory and all that kind of stuff is just, I fancy myself an intelligent man, but I am nowhere near able to understand, quantum physics or string theory. So if you can, let's break this down to a level where, the average listener is going to be able to make heads or tails.
Sure. And that's what I try to do with my book, Travels Through Time, is, I try to, kind of put it out there in layman's terms, something that, people can comprehend and understand and don't need a PhD in physics to understand what's going on here. I try to say that the book has a lot of science in it without being too sciencey, and a lot of physics or a lot of metaphysics in it without being too metaphysical. Mm-hmm. I think it's kind of a nice evening out. So when we're talking about time, this is really it's a human construct that we've devised to describe our reality. That it's a measuring tool. So we use it to figure out when the seasons are, when to plant the crops, when to show up at work on time so that our supervisors don't get upset with us. Right. But that's all. It's a measuring stick that we've come up with to describe our reality. But time itself, doesn't really exist. When we think of the river of time, this thing that we are caught up in, it's not really the water in that river that is the thing that's making time move. When we're using this sort of analogy, it's really the banks that are keeping everything compressed in. That this rule, this boundary that's been put there to make that water flow. Now, if you were to remove those banks, then all that water, what we're calling time, would spill out into a great big pond and would just be stagnant and never present. And that's kind of what we're looking at here. Another way to view it is if we're driving through a town, say at 35 miles an hour, and there's a couple of houses, maybe there's a little convenience store, a gas station, that sort of thing. It takes us 10 minutes to drive through this town, okay? Mm-hmm. Means we have a time relationship with this town. Well, let's take the same town, but this time we're flying over the town in an airplane. We can see the whole thing all at once. So what we had once experienced in time, we're now experiencing in space. And that's kind of what we're looking at here, that we're looking at time as all one object. Okay? And that is in the fourth dimension. So we're very familiar with the three dimensions, line, plane, a 3D object. All those are ever present to us. The fourth dimension is time. If we were to rise above that, our theoretical physics tells us there are up to 11 hyperspatial dimensions. So everything that's above the fourth, 5, 6, 7, 8, and onward, they're able to access time as if it is an object.
Now,
and so,
let me jump in real quick. Is there? I know that like some of these dimensions, once we start getting past the third dimension, the fourth dimension, they're kind of theoretical, right? How far have we proven that there are, say, 5, 6, 7, 8?
Right. And you're right. This is all theoretical, fifth and beyond. Our math is showing this to be. Where we are at on the fourth, what's interesting is we're actually multidimensional beings. Basically, it's our consciousness that's on the fourth dimension, and so that consciousness is inside a third dimensional object, which is really fascinating. So, our reality is within those fourth dimensions. Everything above that is basically our theoretical science. But the fascinating analogy that Michio Kaku puts out there, which I love, and he used it in an episode of Ancient Aliens that we were in together, where he talks about take the fish in a pond, and that's their reality. That's everything that they are experiencing. Now, if you were to take that fish out of the pond into a new dimension, then they would be totally blown away by everything that they see. And so,
would that be as simple as just lift? Because I have a koi pond in my backyard. Mm-hmm. Would that be as simple as just pulling one of those koi out of the water. And
right. They have no concept being in that pond of, the entire world beyond that ponds in your backyard. They don't know anything about your backyard. They don't know anything about your house, the people walking around, the city that you live in. No idea whatsoever. Kind of the same with us. We are trapped within this dimension here, and we really, even though we have a lot of fun, wonderful sci-fi movies and things like that, the concept of what the fifth dimension and beyond really is would totally blow our minds.
So is there, like Michio Kaku, I mean, obviously brilliant man, but in trying to describe this other dimension, I know that the mathematics shows that it's there, but does the mathematics give an indication of what that place would be like?
We've tried to put together, what we call the Tesseract, which is really, I think it's a really heavy-handed way of trying to show that next dimension, because essentially it's putting a cube on top of a cube. It's pretty heavy-handed. So what is it that's beyond us? And that's really the big question. What does that look like? I think we get glimpses of it sometimes when people have, they might call a supernatural experience. I think these are occasions in which we are getting some sort of bleed over. Another good example is, for those that might be familiar with the idea of flatland. So this is and this will probably be a little easier to kind of picture. So flatland is basically a flat two-dimensional world. Okay, so it only has the geometry of basic, square, circle, that sort of thing. So if a three-dimensional object, a sphere, were to suddenly come through flatland, the people living within flatland would have no concept really whatsoever of the whole entire sphere. What they would see passing into their world, I could say this flatland is like a tabletop. What they would see passing into their world would at first be a very, very small circle, which would widen as it got to its apex and then shrink back down as it was passing through. Right. So it became a very, very small circle again. And that's all that they would witness was the circle. They would have no idea of that great giant sphere. So that's one of the problems that we have being within our dimension is we might get a glimpse of what those things are beyond, but we are in no way, shape, or form really getting that full picture of what that is.
Interesting. That is a very, I guess when you're saying that, it kind of, I don't play video games, but I watched my son while he was growing up playing video games. And, like in the earlier days, before the rendering has gotten so incredible that it has now. But I when you're explaining that, I'm seeing that sphere passing through, just that plane. Mm-hmm. And what you're referring to is just the ever-changing outer circumference of that as it passes through.
Correct.
Now, mathematics proves this. It's hard for me, and don't get me wrong, I'm not questioning it, but it is able to define those types of imagery that you guys come up with.
Yeah, and I couldn't give you the math behind it because I'm not a mathematician. I was always very good at math. I couldn't throw the formulas out at you. But in my research, again, this is quote unquote theoretical physics. So that tells you right in the title, these are theories. To be able to sincerely prove the other dimensions would be to travel to one and, of course, bring the proof back.
Right.
So it's really our math that's showing us. It's just like when we talk about, what a black hole is or how how large the known universe is right now. All of this is done through math. And so we're trusting that math to be correct.
It's interesting. It's mind-boggling. I'm sure, obviously, you've written a book about it, and you've probably done lectures on it, and you're very well versed in those theories. But for somebody, from my standpoint, who has not been steeped in that, it's a tough thing to wrap your head around. Time. What is time? I understand that it's a human construct. I understand that we had to come up with and create something because we had to be able to tell, like you said, what time to be to work, when to plant the crops. But like when we pass on, when we die, when we leave this plane, from what I've heard from both mediums, psychics, paranormal investigators that are head and shoulders above what you would consider just normal weekend warriors, it seems to be a common consensus that once we leave this plane, time is either not, it's not what we're used to.
Right.
But does it still exist? Or, I heard you in one of your other talks, you were talking about a gentleman who basically, I think it was a story about a doppelganger, and it was a gentleman who, I remember he had gold trim on his suit.
Yeah.
German fella, I think, was the gentleman.
Yeah.
That, he had what people would consider to be a doppelganger, where he saw himself. But then later he sees himself as what he saw previously. So as far as time goes, are we talking that not only is it a possibility that everything that is happening right now, this conversation between you and me is happening, it's happening multiple times?
So, yeah, that's a great example. I love telling that story about Goethe. And he was a very famous German poet. He had a reputation, and in one of his great works, Poetry and Truth, he relates this story. And just to sum it up for your listeners, he's walking down the road one day to Jotunheim. He's having an affair with a young woman there. He's kind of lost in thought. And all of a sudden he notices off on the side of the road this man in a gold-trimmed gray suit. And turns his head to get a better look at him because it's an interesting suit, catches his eye, and all of a sudden, boom, the guy disappears. I'm like, oh, man, what in the world was that? I don't understand what just happened. The guy was just right there. Continues on his way and meets the young woman. Years later, he's walking down the same road in the opposite direction. And he comes across that spot, and all of a sudden he realizes he's wearing a suit. He's wearing that gold-trimmed gray suit. Not like he really purposefully, walked out the door with it that day or whatever. He just happened to put it on, happened to be walking down that road and noticed, oh my gosh, I am that guy. I was the guy in the gold-trimmed gray suit. So, yeah, it gets chopped up as a doppelganger case because two of him at the same time. And a lot of those stories, become legends and become like these evil twin sort of things. And I really don't think that's the case at all, especially with this one. I believe it was some sort of time slip. He had seen himself at another point in time. And what's happening here, for him, I think the catalyst, because people wonder, okay, how do you make a time slip happen? What's the catalyst? For him, I think it had something to do with the meditative state that he was in. Because when you get lost in thought, or, modern terms, when we zone out, it happens to us, all the time. We might be driving down the road, we're kind of lost in our thought. We zone out. We miss our exit. We miss our turn. That sort of thing. Yeah. And I think, and that's a type of meditative state. And I think that's what was going on with him. And when he turned to get a better look at this guy, it broke him out of that meditative state. Boom. But he was able to tune into himself. You know, everything in the universe comes down to, energy, resonance, frequency, vibration. And I believe that he was in that meditative state, able to tune into that and get a glimpse of it. And then once he turned, it broke that, whatever that connection was. And so with time, and I have a thing I call stacked time theory. All time is concurrent. Past, present, future, all happening at the same time. Again, if we go fifth dimension and beyond, because fourth is time, they would all see that as some sort of object, something that you could actually pass in and out of at will at any moment within that time. And so if every moment throughout history is a photograph within that stack, if you were to figure out how to get two of those moments to resonate at the same frequency, I think sometimes they accidentally do, like here with Goethe and there's a lot of other examples. Then two of those moments can tune into each other for just a moment, and that's where I might chalk it up as a ghost or a haunting or something like that, where we see a person from another point in time, and they turn and look at us as if we're the ghost or something else to that effect. Mm-hmm. And this is more of when we talk about time. It doesn't really exist. Again, it's something that we've kind of defined. We're caught, whatever that control is that's kept this flowing. That in a sense you could say is almost like time in the sense that it has that control set on us. So when we talk about like simulation theory and things like that, that would be like one of the rules or one of the parameters of the simulation. But yeah, as far as those from the afterlife, looking back in, they've ascended to some other realm, some other higher dimension. So yeah, time as we perceive it definitely works different for them and probably doesn't even exist for them. So
you talk, you've thrown some terms out, time slip, mm-hmm. And then in this story of this gentleman who sees this guy in this gold trim suit, and then later on, later on he realizes that he's the guy in the suit. So yeah. He obviously saw into his future. Mm-hmm. Is that I don't know how to ask the question. Is it relevant that he saw himself in the future, or is it more relevant that he saw himself in a different plane, in a different dimension, a different existence, a different parallel universe, stacked time, like you said?
Yeah. Well, okay. So when he saw himself in that moment, he wasn't really seeing himself in another dimension. He was seeing himself in the fourth dimension, but at another moment somewhere up and down the stack. So, how do I put this? It wasn't anything like an interdimensional being or another. It was basically a blue dover. So if everything is there in concurrent with each other, but just at a different frequency, like right now we have radio waves surrounding us, and wireless technology that hasn't really been working for us this evening very well. We can't see those waves normally.
Right.
Or like heat. We don't normally see those waves. Sometimes we do see a heat wave, right? But that's all still right here on our plane of existence together. So even ourselves in the same location, like in this room that I'm in right now, basically every version of me that has ever been here and ever will be here is all right here with me. But it's all operating on different frequencies, so I don't see it. So all of those frequencies are around us, but they're not in another dimension.
Okay.
They are all here in the fourth dimension. And if we could tune into the same frequency of whatever something is on, we would be able to then actually see it. Because our eyes only work within a certain spectrum of light.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
And auditory as well. We can only hear in a certain frequencies.
Exactly. So animals are a little bit different. You know, we know that animals can hear a lot more than us. They might be staring at a corner. Sometimes we're like, oh, are they looking up at a ghost or something like that? And no, they're probably hearing something from, 3 yards away, but, in that direction, something like that. And they can see things a lot better than us too. So, we're limited in that capacity.
Like I was saying, probably before we started hit record, or maybe it was during, I have Bigfoot experiences come to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, my son, he won't say it was a Bigfoot experience because he didn't actually see whatever it was in clear, broad daylight. So, a lot of the things that he said resonates with many other experiences that I've heard or been told about people who have been around these things. But it seems to me, people talk about Bigfoot and being able to cloak, and that sounds ridiculous. It sounds like something straight out of a Predator movie. It's make-believe, it's sci-fi. But I had an interesting conversation with a woman who had been out in the woods hunting with her son. Her husband was on the same property, ways away. And it became apparent to her that she was in the presence of one of these things.
Mm-hmm.
And she motioned for her son to get down out of the stand, and they were going to vacate the area. As they were doing so, she turned around and she said that the strangest part of the whole thing was when she turned around. She was very familiar with the property they were hunting. They'd hunted there for years and years. And when she looked around behind her, there was still a sky. There were still trees. There were still leaves on the ground. It still looked like a normal wooded scene, but it didn't look right. It looked different.
Okay.
And
how different?
Like enough so that what she should have been seeing would have been what she would recognize, and she didn't.
Okay.
And when she was telling me that, I mean, not that that's not hard enough to wrap your mind around anyway, but that kind of started to clue me in that maybe these things are able to use different frequencies, or maybe they're not cloaking, but maybe they're exhibiting an ability to create a frequency, to vibrate. I mean, because like if you're looking at something and you're being subjected to an aggressive vibration, your eyes are going to get jiggly. You're not going to see clearly. So I started thinking about, because Ron Moorhead wrote a book, The Quantum Bigfoot, where he starts delving into quantum mechanics of the possibility that these things are more entangled than what we know. And it just kind of dawned on me that frequency and vibration seem to be a key. You know, people talk about hearing a wood knock as a result of being around a Bigfoot. But then you talk to somebody who's gone and investigated a paranormal location, you know, say a haunted house, and what do they hear? They hear knocks on the wall. Right?
Yeah.
Maybe those aren't knocks. Maybe those aren't just, hey, rapping on the door or the wall. Maybe that's a component to these things coming into our perception. Maybe that's you understand what I'm saying? Maybe that's a component.
I understand what you're saying. Yeah, maybe that's a result of moving in and out of the dimension. And, you know, some people report, you know, seeing flashes of light and things like that too. So certainly any of those, you know, extra elements could be indicative of that happening. Yeah, and that's an interesting conversation, because I know there's two sides to that, and people within the community and those that are supposed to be, and those that are experts in that field. I mean, I'm of course familiar with you know, Bigfoot phenomenon and all that, but those that are, you know, that's what they do is you know, that's their field of research. You know, those people they'll butt heads on that a lot of times too. Yeah. So, but it's fascinating, and I understand each argument. You know, the idea that, okay, maybe this is a, you know, an ancient hominin that's just a handful left. I can understand that. Those that say that you know, interdimensional creature of some sort, I can understand that one too. You know, I haven't got a stand on that one yet, because I understand both sides of the argument. I'm just kind of, you know, collecting the data on that one. And I almost, you know,
I almost wonder if, you know, that butting of heads that you're talking about. I'm not necessarily on one side or the other, but I am somewhere in between. You know, on that, I'm somewhere in between on poltergeist activity and ghosts and all that. I don't know that, you know, anytime somebody says they're an expert in something that we don't have tangible evidence of, it, you should turn around and run. That's not to say that the people who are standouts in the field of Bigfootery have not done their work, and, you know, something's leaving those tracks, right? And if you can look at that, you can dissect the morphology of the foot and the bone structure and everything. Something's leaving that print. So I think that's undeniable. But, you know, there's so many things in this world, you know, like octopuses that can change their color. You know, they can look like the coral reef. I mean, that's in our natural world. You can go to an aquarium and see it happen. So is it that weird that another animal could possibly have that same kind of a trait? I don't think it is. But whenever you start talking about, a lot of them call it the woo, then you start having issues and breakdowns in wanting to have a conversation about it. But you know, kind of back to what you were talking about. You know, I've had some instances in my life that have, like, would be considered deja vu. Very strong, you know, never been here before, totally recognize it. I'm not going to go as far as to say that I had a vision of this place, or I knew that I was going to be here. That's not what I'm saying. But sometimes I wonder, you know, like, when you have that very strong deja vu, are you coming extremely close to yourself having already been there, only on that next plane?
Yeah, there's a couple different ways to look at it. When we have that deja vu moment, one could be a reoccurrence of, you know, maybe a dream or a fragment of a dream that's left over, and when we are asleep, our brain enters into different wave states, and some of those different states can connect us to other elements of this universe. We talk about, I call it eternal knowledge, but Carl Jung called it the collective unconscious. There's other people who call it, you know, the Akashic records. There's some, you know, knowledge out there that you can tap into, for one, and people bring that back with them. You know, or you can experience these other moments in time as well. And you might bring something, or might observe something, kind of bring it back with you that might be an entire scene that you remember, or you walk into a location months later, or days later, or whatever, like, oh my gosh, I just had a dream about this entire thing just happening.
Mm.
But sometimes only a fragment of that remains. Like, a lot of times, like, I probably had, this morning before I finally got out of bed, I probably had, 3 or 4 different dreams. And some of them I know had some length to them, but I could probably only give you a fragment, like maybe a just real quick, well, I was at this particular location, and that's it. That's probably all I could tell you. A lot of times what we retain is just really fragmentary. So you might walk into whatever that was, like, oh man, this seems really familiar. And that's like a deja vu. But there's other cases in which, okay, if all time is concurrent, past, present, and future, that means we may be walking into locations in which one of our past lives is currently there. You're a believer in reincarnation in past lives. That means one of our past lives is already there. And so that deja vu may feel familiar to us because we're currently there, but maybe 100 years ago or 100 years into the future. And that's why it feels so familiar to us.
So time slips and the Mandela Effect.
Yeah.
The Mandela Effect for me is a tough one, because I'm like, am I just not remembering it right? Or is there... Now, I'm going to tell you, I had Fruit of the Loom underwear when I was a young dude, and there was a cornucopia in that logo. I full on guarantee you it was there. Mm-hmm. And now they say it wasn't. And, so that's one for me. The whole Sinbad playing some kind of a genie or something.
Or whatever.
That one I can't speak on because I didn't watch it. I wasn't. Yeah. But, there's some of them that they hit me pretty hard, and I'm like, somebody's screwing with me, because I remember. So are we phasing into other timelines? Are we phasing into other, offshoot streams of, and if we are, and I realize you can't answer this unequivocally, but your thoughts on it, because you've obviously spent a lot of time looking into this and researching. Are we moving in and out of different times? Are we slipping into other timelines? And is that...
I don't think it's necessarily slipping in and out of other times. I think it's basically a rewriting of the timeline. And so, and some of this, I believe, is, misremembering some different things. But I have had legitimate Mandela Effect type of experiences. You could go out to, some of them that I've had, you can go out to like the list of the top 50 of 100, and you won't find them on there.
Mm-hmm.
And I know several other people, even in other parts of the world, that remember it the same. How do you and I remember the same thing from like 30 years ago? Yeah. That sort of thing. So, I do believe that we have time travelers among us. I believe that people have learned that ability. I don't think they're going back to change branding. That would be really trivial to do, to go back and, let's, take away the cornucopia. And I do remember that as well, by the way.
It was a thing. I'm telling you.
I know it was. I don't think they're going back to remove the cornucopia. I think what's happening is, they're going back, and not even necessarily to do anything malicious or to actually change something purposefully. Maybe some are, but I don't think that they truly are. I think it's more they're going back, watch, observe. Maybe there's information they need. Maybe there's a resource that they need to gather, something like that. And because of inadvertent interactions with the local environment, it's like the butterfly effect. One little thing changes over here, and there are those ripple effects over time.
You think that's what it is?
I think that's what a lot of it is. That, somebody's gone back in time to do something, and it's had some inadvertent ripple effects. And sometimes it's small, like the branding. Other times it's something big, like Nelson Mandela. Is he alive or is he dead? That sort of thing.
That's one that, I can sit here and quantify the existence of UFOs and, most likely extraterrestrials, or if nothing else, ultra dimensionals. No problem. I can sit here and think that, Bigfoot is a real living part of our nature. But when you start monkeying with my memories of, that to me is, I like conspiracies. I think they're fun. I think people that tackle conspiracies are somewhat wrong for doing so, because if you present an idea that you think is the answer to this conspiracy and other people buy that, then you're spreading false information because you don't really know. So right. I think that can be dangerous. But, it's like, it makes me wonder, it's like, are they doing simple little things like this?
Whoever they are, right.
Doing simple little things like this to make us question our memories, to make us question, are we really remembering this? Or, are they going to come at some point and start telling us that, certain things throughout history didn't actually happen? And why aren't those coming to light as Mandela effects? Why isn't it that, Martin Luther King died of natural causes? Something similar to that. It's these silly little things that really don't seem to have any effect other than to make us scratch our head and say, wait a minute, what the hell's going on here?
Right. It's usually something out of pop culture or what have you. Yeah. The biggest one seems to be, when did Nelson Mandela die? And that's how the whole effect came to be coined by Fiona Broome. It could be, and we don't necessarily know how all of that works. So if we do have some sort of time travelers with that type of capabilities, and they don't necessarily have to be, sure, they could be us from the future, but they could very easily be anybody from any of these higher spatial dimensions, 5, 6, 7, 8, and beyond.
Right.
Because again, they would see time is all concurrent, one whole, so they'd be able to move in and out. And we don't know. They might have some methodology for cleaning up some of the bigger things. Like you said, why didn't Martin Luther King Jr. die of natural causes? Maybe on one of the timelines, before it was cleaned up, maybe he did. And then something else happened when they went back and things got changed, and then he ended up being assassinated. It could be. And they might have a method for, if something big like that happens, they might have a method for cleaning it up. For some of the smaller things, again, they're kind of trivial. Does the spelling of Fruit Loops really matter? Not really.
Berenstein versus Berenstain. I mean, I had those books in my house when my kids were growing up.
Yeah.
They're Berenstain.
Berenstain, yeah.
It's just like... But again, you kind of hit it on, a lot of it's pop culture stuff.
Right.
And to me, that's even more curiouser, that it would be simple things like that really, other than making us scratch our head, doesn't really affect anything, but I guess to your point, if somebody did go back and accidentally influence a change. You know, it could have been something completely unrelated to the Berenstein Bears, but it might have been something that affected somebody who affected somebody who affected somebody that ended up naming the book. And
well, and it could be, you know, I don't know I don't know the family history behind the Berensteins, but you know, for a lot of people who came into America, you know, their spelling of their names have changed. You know, my last name Rickseker, it's a Swiss last name, but that's not the original spelling. It was anglicized in the early 1700s in Philadelphia. So if, let's say, some sort of change happens, you know, in the 1700s or what have you, that affected, you know, who ended up there, you know, at the embarking for all of those immigrants. And so you had a different person there, you know, writing the names down because of whatever change happened.
Yeah,
maybe that person spelled it differently. Yeah.
It's
we could speculate all day.
It's one of those things that, you know, the movies, the movies rarely tackle time travel in a manner that doesn't just have a gazillion loopholes in it, and you know, where it doesn't make sense. Nope, that shouldn't be able to happen. You know, my favorites, the Back to the Future franchise, great movies, loved them. And I thought they did a fairly good job of, you know, the continuity behind the idea of it. But there's been some that have just been terrible. And it's almost enough to be kind of off-putting that I don't want to watch it, because if this person didn't really have a decent grasp of the idea of it, you don't want to deal with all the inconsistencies. But
there's go ahead.
Well, there's just one that comes to mind, and I can't remember even the name of the movie, but it seemed like they were going back in almost to prehistoric times, but there was a path that had been created by the people that had gone previously. And the next group of people that were going were cautioned very strongly to stay on the path, because if you step off the path and you know, and I think one of the people actually stepped off, and it was either they stepped on a plant or they stepped on the wing of a butterfly, and then everything just obviously goes to hell in a handbasket. But it's crazy to think that one simple little change like that could affect who knows how much on the other end.
Yeah, we don't know, you know, what repercussions, you know, would really happen if, you know, this little thing was changed. Well, and let's say you know, crushed the wing of a butterfly, or you know, what have you, and that butterfly doesn't get to wherever, and so everything falling out from that. Yeah, and some of those could be very, very long term. Yeah, pop culture is kind of hit or miss with some of those when you're talking some of the loopholes they provide. Sometimes time travel is just used as a gimmick. Of course, Back to the Future uses the grandfather paradox.
Yeah,
I think the one movie that really tries to get to like the science behind it is Interstellar. And you know, I think a lot of people are kind of confused by the ending. They're like, "Oh, here's this great space odyssey movie, and what's all this thing with this, you know, time, and you know, what's this tesseract thing?" That's the one where they actually, instead of the cube on top of the cube type of a tesseract, like we see in a lot of her illustrations. In this, the structure is every single moment in time of his daughter's bedroom, and they spread it out. Like they're all strung together, so they're kind of giving you the idea of string theory. Yeah, and so when he has to deliver the message, it's all with these little strands that he kind of has to tap on and stuff like that. So you're kind of getting that imagery, but and that's really what we're talking about. You know, take that vision right there. Every single moment of his daughter's bedroom is all right there for him to freely access. And so that would be anybody that is outside of the fourth dimension. That's what they would see. Pick a spot and everything's there.
Where's your head on the, what you call it, the collective conscience, the Akashic record, all of the information that has been and never will be being able to be accessed. There's I forget the gentleman's name. I believe he was from India. I think even Tesla kind of alluded to the fact that he would be able to, in a dream state, access that type of stuff. I mean, it makes sense that some of the incredibly genius minds that we've had have thought so far out of the box that they must be getting it from somewhere.
Yeah, and I would definitely say Tesla was certainly one of them. He was so far ahead of his time. He was getting laughed out of the room, and he's talking about one day we'll have the knowledge of the world in our pockets. And people would laugh at him, and yet we can access pretty much everything we need to know right here in our phone. We can put in our pockets. He developed the first drone. He was talking about artificial intelligence in the 1890s. They called it teletomatons back then. That's what he called his first drone. He's like, well, I can build one of these that looks like me, acts like me, talks like me, would respond like me. He's talking about AI. He doesn't understand at that point what it would take, the silicon microchip and all that, how we ended up coming to that. He's thinking it's going to be all, gears, wheels, radio waves, that sort of
more
thing.
Mechanical,
but more mechanical, yeah. But the idea was there. Where did he pull that idea from? Artificial intelligence and drones and cell phones. He was way ahead of his time. And so, this is something that our philosophers. Jung was a psychologist. That people like that have really looked into the way that the human mind works, the way information systems work, and that sort of thing. And really, when we're talking, okay, all time is concurrent. What does that mean? Well, if we get into the idea of we're all in a simulation, I don't mean when we say simulation, a lot of people automatically go to, you're talking a computer simulation. Well, we go to computer because that's our most modern technology.
Right.
Just like, again, Tesla was thinking AI and a teletomaton, instead of a robot, it was going to be gears and wheels and radio waves. He didn't understand the technology behind it. Just like with the simulation, this magnitude, I don't think we really understand the technology behind that. I think it's going to be something far more grand than the computer. I actually think it's going to be more like, biological or organic in nature. But given all that, in a simulation, all the information, all the data is there. If you look at like a flight simulator, okay, when you log into that and you start flying around, learning how to fly the airplane, all the information that you need to run that is there, how the plane works, weather conditions, the terrain, the cities, all of that is all right there, that whole little world. You mentioned computer game earlier. Mm-hmm. All the information for the game world is there. Now you're running through it linearly because the parameters and the rule set of the game, just like with our time.
Right.
But all the information of the game is, back in the day, when you're running on an Atari 2600 or the kids that had the Nintendo systems, was all on a cartridge. Everything was there.
Yeah.
Right? Today it's a download and you run the thing. But still, all the information is there. And so That's what's going on within our universe. All the information is here. And sometimes you're able to tap into this other, what we're calling eternal knowledge, or the collective unconscious, or the Akashic records. People are able to tap into that and bring some of that information back with them. And it's crazy sometimes, because you'll all of a sudden there'll be like, you saw this a lot back in the 1800s, where all of a sudden there's like 5 or 6 guys out of nowhere, inventors, that are all suddenly trying to make the same thing. They're all in different parts of the world, not talking to each other.
Right.
And they're all suddenly making the same thing. What is that? Somehow they tapped into the same piece of knowledge.
Yeah. I'd like to get a glimpse into that. Not that I would be, not that I have the ego to think that I would be able to do anything with it, but
well, and that's kind of the thing. You tap into that, and let's say you pulled up some sort of mechanical physics, whatever. Nuclear physics. I have an uncle who was a retired nuclear physicist. If I cracked open a record that he would know, I'd probably look at it, no idea. So even if I've got a glimpse of it, I would have no idea how to practically use it. Which
is a weird thing, because this information seems to come to the people who can do something with it.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So I think we're able to tune into whatever, like I said, some people call it the Akashic record, so we'll use that term for right now. I think some people, they're able to tune into those records that are appropriate for them,
that are relevant.
Something that's relevant to them. They will understand it. Nuclear physicists might not understand, quilting. So they're not going to open that one.
Right. Well, like you said, we could go on and speculate for days with all of this. Yeah. I did want to get into something that's a little bit more kind of in the headlines, and it has been something that, I don't know, about 3 years ago I got really excited about, because I was like, finally, everybody that said I was nuts. And that was a bit of a flash in the pan, because they decided to make a public announcement, like right in the midst of a pandemic, which overshadowed something that I thought should have been an incredibly insightful thing. But UFOs, I hate the new terminology, UAPs. Let's call them what they are. They're UFOs.
Right.
Much like the Bigfoot world, where you have people that are butting heads. You have the Dr. Greers, who are, these things are benevolent and they're here to help us, and they want to sing Kumbaya with us and usher in a new world peace. You have the Luis Elizondos, who are saying that these things are posing a clear and present threat to our national security. You have the Nick Popes of the world who are excited to talk about this stuff. It was much less hidden in his country, where he comes from the UK. Yeah. You've got the Prime Minister of Canada, who the former Prime Minister Paul Hellyer, who flat out comes out and sounds like a loon, just saying that, they're here, they're among us, and you better watch out. But then you have congressional hearings. You have gentlemen like Commander David Fravor, who, arguably you were in the Air Force. I mean, Fravor is a stand-up dude.
Right.
Stand-up dude.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, you don't get to the position that he was by being a flake. I don't know a lot about David Grush. Kind of came out of nowhere with his stuff. Seems like his background checks out. Nobody's been able to say that, no, he didn't work at S4 like they did with Bob Lazar. But, even Bob Lazar, I mean, for as many years as he's been around, his story has never changed. He's stuck to it. It has never
changed. And what's interesting about his story is I don't believe him on the I believe him, but I don't believe him because of all the things that he has said about trying to learn propulsion systems, extraterrestrial craft and all that stuff. I believe his story because of his personal side of it, where he was having all the issues going on with his wife and all that, and they were about to pull his security clearance. Yeah. That whole story that he tells right there, because I spent a couple of years at NSA, and I went through something very similar, and everything that he said from his incident was, almost verbatim, this sort of thing that I went through. And so it was like, yeah, I believe this guy because all of that is absolutely the way things, went down. So I had no reason to not believe him on the other material. So it's kind of interesting, the things that will make you believe somebody. It is interesting how everybody kind of has a bit of a different perspective. And so, it's, when it comes to, and they used to call it the UFO problem. Now I guess it's the UAP extraterrestrial problem or something. And I've said this, with, when I've done my paranormal research with shadow people and all that. A lot of people will try to say shadow people are the most evil of all evil things, are dark, malicious, malevolent, all that sort of thing. It's like, well, it just depends on which one you run into. So, okay, if you're saying they're all benevolent, well, sure. You're going to have some that are nice and maybe giving and want to share technology and that sort of thing. Ones that are a threat to national security, you're going to have those too. It just depends on which one you're running into. Kind of like with humans, it's going to be very simplistic. Some people are good, some people are bad. Some extraterrestrials are going to be good, some of them are going to be bad. It kind of depends on which one you're interacting with. I think people want like a really simplistic answer that this is what this phenomenon is, and really it's a smattering of different things. So even the craft themselves, the things that we're seeing in the sky, are some of them actual physical craft from other planets in the cosmos? Sure. Are some of these interdimensional? They're phasing in and out of our plane of existence. Absolutely. Are some of these ultra-terrestrial, something that's actually right here on Earth with us that we can't usually see with our own eyes, but sometimes we do? Yes. I think all of these phenomena are a possible explanation for some of these events. I think all of these things are happening. Because
I just got like a crystal bullet through my brain. It's something I never thought about until the discussion we just had prior to this. And that is that, so even though some of them, the craft that we see in the sky look to be a nuts and bolts type of craft, but then you have other ones that exhibit much stranger, weirder looking properties to them. And if we in this present timeline are experiencing extraterrestrial craft from another planet, another universe, another galaxy, it makes sense now that some of these things that we're seeing in the sky that look so different, that are still considered UAPs, when they come in, they look like they're more acting more almost like a biological thing, or they seem to be phasing in and out. And and if we're being visited by another sentient being that comes from a different dimension, it would make sense that their craft would act differently and
right. Right, because other dimensions are going to have other physical properties. Yeah. So again, when we were talking before, like the whole flatland thing, everything there is a flat. You're only going to have a square, circle, rectangle, but you have a sphere come through. You're only going to see the circle part of it.
Right.
And the rest of it are going to have different properties. So the same thing with some of these different phenomena that we are seeing in our sky. Some of these that are crossing over from some other dimension, we're only seeing what can physically render that, whatever has that correct geometry for our dimension. We're only going to see that part of it. And the rest of it, we're not. It's going to be very, very bizarre to us if we were to actually get a glimpse of that. And on the time travel note, some of these could actually be time travelers from the future, using whether it's some sort of craft or some other technology that we can't comprehend. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's, we are the time travelers. There could be extraterrestrial time travelers or other interdimensional time travelers and that sort of thing. So there are selection of people out there that are saying, well, these UFOs and UAPs, they're not extraterrestrials at all. They're just us from the future. Once we've learned time travel. And that's one idea, but it's kind of forgetting that there's 5 billion years left to our planet. Humans on this planet have, the oldest Homo sapien they have found is about 315,000 years old. Okay. That's really not that long ago in the grand scheme
in the big
planet.
picture.
Yeah. You think about, the dinosaurs went extinct 64 million years ago. That's just over 1% of the entire lifetime of the Earth. We're about 4.5 billion years. So the idea that humans are going to survive on this planet another 5 billion years might be stretching it. And who knows why humans might not survive here. We could come up with 1,000 different reasons. But, let's say it's 4 million, 100 million years in the future. There might not be humans here at this time. Could be a couple different. So it could be another intelligent life form that evolves, develops technology, develops time travel technology, and comes back. So could be indigenous here to Earth, but not human. Another idea is, okay, maybe there is an extraterrestrial spacefaring race that colonizes our planet 100 or 200 million years from now after humanity's gone, and they end up developing time travel technology. So it still could be an extraterrestrial race living here on Earth, going back in time. But we could spend all day on different possibilities. So when people are like, well, this is the answer.
Yeah,
might be for some, but there's a lot of other things it could be too.
It's a fun conversation to have.
It is, yeah.
And just this conversation with you, like I just said, that's a thought that I've never given consideration to. There's another perspective to look at all this strangeness through a different lens. And
absolutely.
So where does your head, taking all your research out of it? Well, not really take it out of it, but obviously you need it to make an educated statement on it. But where is your head at as far as, do you think it's all of the above as far as the extraterrestrial or UFO presence in our skies? Do you think it's all above? Do you think any one of those aforementioned people and their belief systems or their theories on these things are more correct than not? Or
I think it's a lot of the above. And I think it's hard to say all. And I think it's hard to say it's just one. So I think it's a number of them that, when you look at the phenomenon, there's a lot of different recorded experiences. There's a lot of different things that we're seeing. Sometimes they are light anomalies, and they show up in a variety of different ways. Sometimes it's a physical craft. Again, we are seeing different technologies. We might have the saucer type craft up there. We might have a cigar shaped one. We might have a triangle shaped one. There are all different shapes and sizes.
Yeah.
So they could be different races, and it could be one race with a fleet, and those shapes are a different function. We don't know. Sometimes these beings just kind of appear out of nowhere. It looks like maybe the typical gray alien. Sometimes it looks completely different. We've had so many accounts of different shaped creatures and beings. And that's why people have written these massive, huge books describing all these experiences. So I think we're experiencing a lot of different things, and so I can't say any of these guys are 100% correct. I can't say they're 100% wrong either. I think they might, to a degree, all be right to some point.
I think the one thing for me is that, with as long as these things have been coming here, even going back into ancient history, I think there's a pretty good argument to be made that there is some recorded history of these things being here. And for people that see those, petroglyphs or the carvings that, we would look at and say, well, they're going to say, nah, that's fake. It was supposed to be something else. I disagree with that. But having had them be around us for as long as they have, and that the fact that we still exist, I think tells me that their primary interest isn't in eradicating us. I think I think we're safe. I don't know that we're going to turn into a food source for them, or maybe we'll be enslaved and go back to digging mines of gold for them. I don't know.
Right.
But
there are a couple of different ways to look at it. If they are superior beings to us, they could just be completely disinterested in us. They haven't annihilated us yet. Okay, because we're still here. And then you got to ask why. Okay, are they trying to save us from ourselves eventually? Maybe, but is it they're just kind of disinterested in us? Like, how much are we paying attention to fire ants? Are we really that interested? I mean, we are a superior being to fire ants. Are we going to try to save them from themselves if they get into a battle with each other?
Yeah.
So, kind of looking at it from a perspective, of us looking down onto, other beings that are on our planet. How much of an interest do we? I mean, we have people that study that, right? And then we scoop them up and we'll make a colony and we study their behaviors. And that sounds like a alien abduction, right? But we're not. The average person is pretty much disinterested in them unless they go invading their home or something.
I always go back to this. If you were to take every animal on this planet and line them up, and you put us at the end of it, and you go through it and you're looking at hair-covered things, four-legged things, things with claws, things with gills, things with feathers, everything on this planet, for the most part, looks like it's like that the old kid song, one of these things is not like the other.
Right, Sesame Street.
when you get to us, it's always been very glaringly obvious to me, and a lot of people will want to pull in the religious aspects of, that why we are what we are. But we're the one thing that doesn't look like we're natural to this world.
Right.
And there used to be a lot of talk, like when I don't know how old you are, but when I was a younger man, and a young kid even, there was a lot of talk about the missing link. There's that gap. You never hear that talked about anymore.
No, and it's interesting because they do find other hominins. There's been some great research there that's done, and they're like, oh yeah, it's somewhere in the evolutionary chain somewhere. But yeah, they've still never found that one that links us back to all of that. They find all of these other. There is a missing part of our history there. Something happened. And I've definitely toyed around with the idea that we're not originally from here, or there might have been some species that came, because there's the whole gene splicing thing that could not have naturally happened. That's within our DNA. So did somebody come down here and play around with genetics of something with here? Something happened.
Yeah.
Because just kind of basic stuff. What other animal cooks their food? What other animal clothes themselves? It's just we're the only ones that do, and that's just basic. A couple of the necessities there. But there's so many other ways, that we are different than other animals on this planet. It's bizarre.
We stand out like a sore thumb.
Yeah, we do.
Ladies and gentlemen, my guest tonight has been Mike Rickseker. Mike, it's been a pleasure talking with you. I know we're pushing the limits of the time you had for me tonight. So do me a favor, and if you would, please let everyone know where they can find you, where they can find your books, and everything else related.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, you can find me MikeRickseker.com, MikeRickseker.com. And then also I have my online learning portal, the community, connecteduniverseportal.com. That's where we have wonderful conversations like this.
I appreciate you, sir. It's been a pleasure, and I'd like to get you back on again, because I've enjoyed the conversation, and I think there's miles to go before any of us sleep. So plenty to talk about.
That would be fantastic. I would enjoy that.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Eric.
Good night.